up, Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Good evening and welcome to the No Treason Podcast, episode 19. I'm your host, Jonathan Drake. We're live again tonight. Everyone's filing in. PJ Corrigan is fretting over being a minute late. I'm not that much of a hard ass. I see April Ann, Polymath, S. Heisler, Claire Cat, Matt, Jennifer Ray just showed up. Tattooed teacher made it. Whew, she says. We're going to try something interesting tonight. I was discombobulated last week, and I'm even more discombobulated this week because hey, Kyle, nice to see you. My laptop battery has been on the fritz for a long time, and it's overheating and all that kind of stuff. And so I ordered a replacement, and I sat down and followed the iFixit step-by-step tutorial. The most detailed laptop surgery I've ever done. And I completely take my computer apart, and I get to the point where I'm starting to remove the battery, and I'm looking at the replacement, and I'm looking at the battery, and I'm like, this doesn't look the same. And so I realized I had ordered the wrong one. And so I started returns, ordered the proper replacement. It won't be here until like Thursday or something. So I'm borrowing my wife's laptop. So I don't have my usual spread. I've got my main monitor still, but I have a second monitor that is it's like her small little 13-inch MacBook is my second monitor. And I was in a scramble when I got home from work trying to get everything put together, connecting cameras and microphones and all that kind of stuff. And it was down to the wire. And the older daughter and my wife went to see a play this evening with some friends, and so my youngest and I did a daddy-daughter date tonight, so that's always fun. But rush home, make sure I spend quality time with her, and make her feel like she's important, which she is. I don't have to like pretend, but it's also had a deadline. I had to get back in a certain time. But anyway, so with all of that, then as the subtext, I'm also going to try per Sod This's recommendation to have a live call-in portion. We'll do that towards the end of the show. I think I'll have enough time for maybe 15 or so minutes, maybe toward the end. We'll see how things go. So let's go ahead and dive right into it, and we'll start with a recap. Last week, prior to wrapping up the review of oaths, we skipped ahead a little thanks to Claire Cat's question in the chat, and we dug a little deeper into some of his material. Spooner's material, and we jumped ahead to the chapter called Objections to handle the common objection: what if the jury can't be trusted to be objective? What if they're partisan? And the quick recap is 4 basic points. The first is that the risk of justice not being served by a jury, maybe due to them being compromised or something, it's not a sufficient argument against the protections against injustice that trial by jury represents. So you can sort of get paralysis by analysis, and it's better to try to have some form of protections in place, even if those protections might end up hindering the proper administration of justice. Spooner argues that trial by jury provides the best option for protecting justice and against tyranny and all that. The second point was that concentrated authority in permanent judges opens the door wider for corruption because the judges are known, they're established, They're subject to temptation and bribery and all that sort of thing. We saw how people were willing to overlook obvious election fraud and seemingly got paid in a judgeship. Not the kind of person you want to have sitting on a bench who's supposed to be judging completely by their a clear conscience. Their consciences would not be clear. The third point is that temporal nature of a jury makes those avenues for corruption more difficult. There's obviously lots of nuance to each of these points. We will go through when we get to that chapter. We'll go through these in more detail. The fourth and final point was that with the requirement of unanimity, the odds of all 12 people being corrupt are low enough to not be a concern. Because if you remember, unanimity is a requirement because the government must be able to convince all 12 people that a law should be a law. And this was an aspect of trial by jury, hearkening back to some of the first couple of episodes. Trial by jury, Spooner actually refers to as trial by country, and the unanimous jury as a random sampling is the means by which one can determine with relative certainty that all or nearly all of the country would agree. And if the person is not satisfied with the outcome of the jury, there was a process, even in the Anglo-Saxon time, of appeals. The appeal would not be to some higher court that is just judged by some installed person, but would also be a randomly selected jury of 12 people. So expanding the sample base, so to speak. And so, that was utilized in the Anglo-Saxon period. It certainly could be utilized if we were to bring this back. One of the rabbit trails from that discussion was that analyzing the system that Spooner describes through the lens of a corrupt and broken system such as we have today would lead to misconceptions. For instance, Spooner argues that the random selection and temporary nature of the jury provides enough of a buffer against corruption, certainly better than what exists now. And if you think about what we have today, we have intensely curated juries, curated evidence, curated arguments, and the juries are explicitly directed by the judge to essentially not question the law. It has been upheld by the Supreme Court that the jury does have the right to nullify a law, but you will find yourself on the receiving end of the contempt of the court. They'll say that you're being held in contempt, but I would rephrase that as being you're held in their contempt. If you even mention that as a defense counsel and try to inform the jury what is their natural right to resist tyranny by saying this law is bad. The heart and soul of what trial by jury is meant to be is thus kneecapped at the outset. And what is that except corruption? I will take true trial by jury with the low possibility of a corrupt jury over what we have today, any day. I see Ash has joined us, AOB 22, Grumpy Drone. Good to see everybody. We will cover, as I mentioned before, we'll cover this again when we go through each of the objections that Spooner talks about. It's sequentially in the next chapter, but I'm going to jump around a little bit for next week because there's a topic that ties into what we'll be talking about tonight, and it goes well together. EC was here. Good to see you, buddy. Lastly, last week we finished looking at the oaths that judges and kings were made to swear upon assumption of their offices. And the most interesting to me was that the coronation oath, and was that of the coronation oath and the line that the king is sworn to, where he is required to maintain the laws and customs which the common people have chosen. There was no representative democracy at that point when this oath was first administered, and it was the oath that the kings took up until 1660 something, so for like 500 or 600 years. So the only possible means by which the common people, when it was first administered, could have chosen the law would have been through the jury process, during which the people impaneled randomly on a jury, decided if the law was worth enforcing, and they were deciding that by their own consciences. Ash asks if this is a hoodie. Yes, it is a hoodie. It's a plum-colored hoodie that my wife picked out for me. I would look like the Emperor from Star Wars. You're not sorry. Don't even pretend. So it must be stressed here that if the jury is not able to decide the law by conscience, if that's not an acceptable standard, by what means does a legislature decide the law? If the only moral government is that which has obtained the consent of the governed, then what better means is there in discerning that consent than through the jury? Tonight, we'll examine Spooner's argument for why juries have the same authority over the law in civil cases as they do in criminal cases. This has direct relevance to one of the biggest travesties of justice today, that disobeying tax laws, along with quite a number of other fines and fees and so on, is treated as a civil suit initially, and thus is not automatically afforded the protection of a jury trial. So they've just sort of sidestepped the whole issue by just saying, yeah, we're going to have this dealt with by a judge. And you have to go through quite a lot of legal process to get to the point where you could even sit before a jury. As Ash is fond of saying, the process is the punishment. And then lastly, as I mentioned already, we'll close out tonight's show by opening up the proverbial phone lines. It won't be a phone line. I'm going to have to do a little jury rigging here. And we'll see what sort of craziness we can muster by taking some questions. And if this beta test crashes and burns, we can all blame Sod This for the idea. But first, My Pillow, if I can find my videos, here we are. All right. My Pillow has proudly sponsored Badlands Media, so we are happy to partner with them.
It's finally here, our second annual mega sale. This sale only comes around once a year, so take advantage of the best offers ever while you can. For example, save 50% on our Giza Dream bed sheets, as low as $29.98. And for the first time ever on TV, My Pillow mattresses and My Pillow mattress toppers, as low as $99.98. And you save 50% on our Lux Pure 6-piece towel sets. Regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, regular $49.98, on sale for $17.98. Wait on it, mega sale, only $14.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our second annual mega sale. But wait, there's more. To make the mega sale even more special, when you order right now, your order's going to ship absolutely free.
Next up, we have Pet Club.
Science proves that a healthy immune system is the body's first defense against the smallest of ailments to the most catastrophic. Coriolus versicolor is the most sought-after, all-natural supplement for both humans and pets to help boost the immune system. There are over 400 studies worldwide on its effectiveness in humans, including Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, MD Anderson Cancer Center, and now from the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine. Together, we can help reverse this terrible tide now plaguing your loved ones and give them the immune-boosting supplements that they need.
And last but not least, Badlands' very own Soft Disclosure.
I don't say this lightly. This lotion changes people.
My knuckles would actually start to crack. Started using the Soft Disclosure lotion, and I am very impressed. Even within just a few days, I've noticed a tremendous difference.
That's not a script. That's what happens when something actually works.
It puts the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again.
Yeah, that line keeps coming up. Because when you don't use it, your skin starts acting up.
Every single ingredient in Soft Disclosure is intentionally chosen. There's no filler ingredients. It is not like this BS product where they have a bunch of ingredients. Every ingredient listed is for a purpose.
Over 65-star reviews for the lotion alone. Not influencers, not actors, just people whose skin finally shut up. Soft Disclosure Lotion. Once you try it, you'll understand why people won't stop talking about it. Visit softdisclosure.com and use code Badlands and get 10% off.
Speaking of not being on script, I have in my hands the Badlands Soft Disclosure beard brush, and I really do enjoy this thing. I have another beard brush that was a lot stiffer. It also had the boar. I'm going to screw this up because it's like predictive programming. The boar bristles, and I'm very, very pleased with this. It's got a perfect amount of softness and yet stiffness as well, so that it actually gets in there on your beard and does the job. I'm not a beard maxi, contrary to popular opinion. I hate shaving maxi, and so I may as well have a good product to keep my beard not looking as hobo as I usually have it. What I've been doing is actually dripping the beard oil onto the brush and then brushing that into my beard. I love the smell of the stuff. My wife loves the smell of the stuff. My dogs love the smell of the stuff too. I think the beef tallow is attractive to them as well. And yeah, I love this thing. It's the other one I had is like half the size, and so this thing, I mean, it covers my entire cheek, and I really do enjoy it. Especially you can feel it like massaging the skin underneath too, which is great. So that aside, the last thing I'll say too is the next GART event, Great American Restoration Tour, is coming up in April 9th through 12th in Nashville. Tickets are available badlandsmedia.tv/events. Hope to see you all there. And those of you that can make it, be sure to come up and say hello. Okay, let's get into chapter 4. This is entitled The Rights and Duties of Juries in Civil Suits. And to open this discussion, I thought it would be useful to establish what Spooner meant by civil and criminal, since the distinction that he works with is not what we are used to today, but would be useful today. And as I mentioned, I decided that next week we'll cover this his chapter. I didn't mention the title yet, but the chapter is called The Criminal Intent, since I think it goes hand in hand with the topic here in chapter 4. Criminal intent is chapter 9, I believe. But to help set the stage for tonight's discussion, here is a brief description, hopefully, of criminal versus civil law. And that is, the dividing line between criminal suits and civil suits is the intent of the accused. It is slightly more complicated than that, but that is the first principle that drives the discussion. From that chapter, Spooner writes, "There's no moral justice in, nor any political necessity for, punishing a man for any act whatever that he may have committed, if he have done it without any criminal intent. There can be no moral justice in punishing for such an act, because, there having been no criminal motive, there can have been no other motive which justice can take cognizance of, as demanding or justifying punishment. There can be no political necessity for punishing, to warn against similar acts in future, because if one man have injured another, however unintentionally, he is liable, and justly liable, to a civil suit for damages. And in this suit, he will be compelled to make compensation for the injury, notwithstanding his innocence of any intention to injure. He must bear the consequences of his own act, instead of throwing them upon another, however innocent he may have been of any intention to do wrong. And the damages he will have to pay will be a sufficient warning to him to not do the like act again." So civil suits, in Spooner's mind, would be anything that caused damages by virtue of an accident or unintentional actions. It also would encompass matters of contractual disputes, property ownership, custody, those types of things as well. And we'll get more into that next week. But with that as a backdrop, then, understanding that it is the intent of the action that determines whether something is criminal or not, Chapter 4 then opens. Let me get over to my wife's laptop. Chapter 4 opens the evidence already given in the preceding chapters, proves that the rights and duties of jurors in civil suits were anciently the same as in criminal ones, that the laws of the king were of no obligation upon the consciences of the jurors any further than the laws were seen by them to be just, that very few laws were enacted applicable to civil suits. Rodendung asks, all accidents should be liable if there are damages. I mean, if you just think, if you're in a car accident with someone and you damage their car and you're the one at fault, and it wasn't because you were being an idiot or something, you weren't driving crazy, then you would, by any measure of justice, would be liable to pay for the damages. So one of the reasons it is true that juries have authority in civil suits, it's because it may well be that a case that begins as a civil case, so you strike your car in a parking lot, or fender bender of some kind, it could turn into a criminal case if it is discovered that the accused acted knowingly with the intent to damage or the intent to be criminal. In that instance, the same jury is already impaneled. So in the course of the trial for the civil suit, and it comes out that, well, actually this person pissed me off and I intentionally slammed my car into them. So the same jury has already heard the case. It has shifted because of the revelation of intent from a civil to a criminal one. To say that on one hand that jury had no authority over the lesser civil suit, and that statutory penalties would take place over their authority to establish the judgment. To say that they had no authority of that lesser civil suit, but now suddenly, because of the consequences being elevated, they've now gained authority now that it's criminal suit, Spooner finds to be absurd. Especially when it may well be that the civil suit was being tried as a result of a bad law, in which case it is even more imperative that the jury exercise its authority to nullify that tyranny. As I mentioned, you will not find yourself in front of a jury for refusing to pay your taxes until it becomes a criminal trial, and you have to go through a long process of civil proceedings before you get to that point. The authority, rooted again in the natural right of resistance to tyranny and every man's innate understanding of basic common law or natural law, is to judge not just the accused, but the law by which they are being accused. That is the fundamental maxim of trial by jury. The government is, in essence, asking the people, as the jury, to please enforce this or that law. That is what is happening in a trial by jury situation. The bulk of tyranny, as I mentioned, we face today comes in the form of civil penalties, not criminal. You could think of the jury as like a fort at the opening of a harbor back in the days when we didn't have like cruise missiles and stuff. When you had sailing ships, you had a fort that was positioned at a key point protecting the harbor. And any ship that's coming in with ill intent, the fort is there to protect the harbor. The jury is essentially that fort, and the government is coming in like a pirate ship, trying to wreak havoc with its laws, and the jury as the fort stands as the defense. As we'll see in a few minutes, Spooner talks about this exact danger if the jury is deprived that all-encompassing authority. That is, if the government is the one who takes control of the fort. The legal culture of today freaks out over such a thing, asking, how can we rely on a legally illiterate populace to faithfully execute the law? How can we rely on the consciences of regular people to provide the necessary order and security that a nation of any size desperately needs to thrive. And to that, I ask, how is it that the Anglo-Saxons, without that elite class of esquires, the degreed and learned men, fluent in their special coded language, were able to successfully perform the only worthy function of a judiciary, that is, to protect the life, liberty, and property of the average man? And the answer is that without that self-proclaimed elite, stand by. Oh my gosh. I'm using my wife's laptop and I accidentally did something. I'm not sure what. Okay. So the answer to that, without the self-proclaimed elite, the jurors, let me pull up my slides here again. Totally pro show here, everybody. Okay. Let's try that again. We're on slide 3. The jurors must therefore necessarily have judged for themselves of the whole case, and that as a general rule they could judge of it by no law but the law of nature, or the principles of justice as they existed in their own mind. And let's see, everybody can hear me? Give me a 5-5 or something like that in the chat. Dead air. Okay. All right. There we go. Thank you, MedBedsco. The computer went to sleep on me all of a sudden. As I mentioned, I was replacing the battery in my computer and I ordered the wrong one. So my computer's in pieces behind me. I'm using my wife's laptop. So anyway, so the jurors were judging based on the principles of justice as they existed in their own mind. And the question was, how is it that the Anglo-Saxons could have handled the administration of justice without an elite class of lawyers? So I said last week that the more complex a system is, the more likely it is to introduce fraud into that system. And obviously transitioning from a complex back to a simple system will be difficult and it'll take time. Although, as Chris Paul has been saying for years, it could literally all be done in one day. Everyone could just realize that the answer to public debt, for instance, is that it just doesn't exist, at least for us anyway, because it was taken on unlawfully and only on the promise of repayment based on unlawful taxation. And if you remember back to the natural law requirements of a contract, you can't contract to do illegal activity or criminal activity. Do I owe money that someone else borrowed in my name without my express permission to do so? Would any court deriving its authority from the Constitution honor such an obligation? How many of the people who borrowed money in my name could prove even one of their courts that I voted for them? And the answer is, of course, they can't. And speaking of elections, everyone could realize that elections are not the means by which leaders are chosen, that the electoral process itself is a scam, regardless of the transparency. And then if you think about that, if elections are fake, how does something that is fake, like the 2020 election, get stolen? Rhetorical question. Not going to answer that right now. Maybe something else was going on, and I don't have an answer to that, but that's just something I think about in context of all of this stuff. Everyone, going along with the Chris Paul thought experiment, everyone could realize in one day that trial by jury is the palladium of liberty and immediately use it as such. And all at once, that unknowable tranche of codes and statutes disappears and becomes irrelevant. Everyone could realize right now that the only legitimate law is natural law, and that would be somewhat of a paradise. So I don't think we're going to get there all in one day, but it could happen. No one starting a business, if that were to happen, would have to waste any time or money figuring out which state licenses they'd need to procure, which taxes they'd have to file, which regulations they'd have to meet. They'd be free to just start and let the free people decide whether or not they want to support their business. Oh, I have recipes in a kitchen and I'm willing to make you food. You're willing to pay me money for that? That's a restaurant. You don't need to have a health department coming in and establishing rules and fines and regulations if you have customers that are willing to trust you to cook their food. And you're more than welcome to come in and look in my kitchen and see how I prepare the food. And that's all the regulation that you need to worry about, is what your customers actually care about. The regained opportunity cost of having to please an unpleasable state is virtually limitless, because the power the state wields is limitless. And due to the speech and debate clause in the U.S. Constitution, it's absolute and irresponsible, which is the right of property, which means they effectively own us. The trial by jury is the legal process by which we can reclaim that. And we reclaim it by learning what it actually is, which is the goal of what I'm doing here. Spooner builds his case that juries have authority over civil matters in the same way that he does for any other aspect of trial by jury. Definitionally, that is deriving a definition from natural law, a logical progression, and then he also builds a historical case. So historically, he appeals to the Anglo-Saxon culture, and then specifically in this chapter, he appeals to Magna Carta, which demonstrated that the results of a civil case, the paying out of money or the seizure of property, were only to be done after the judgment of the peers of the accused. Let me pull up this slide here. This is chapter 65, or clause 65 from Magna Carta. It says, if we have disseized or dispossessed the Welsh of any lands, liberties, or other things without the legal judgment of their peers, they shall be immediately restored to them. And if any dispute arises upon this head, the matter shall be determined in the marches by the judgment of their peers. So the point here is that the typical result of a civil case, the seizure of property, making people pay liabilities and such, would only been done with the legal judgment of their peers, i.e. the jury. And then definitionally, Spooner writes, furthermore, it would be absurd and inconsistent to make a jury paramount to legislation in criminal suits and subordinate to it in civil suits, because an individual, by resisting the execution of a civil judgment founded upon an unjust law, could give rise to a criminal suit in which the jury would be bound to hold the same law invalid. In other words, in the criminal suit, the jury would be obliged to justify the defendant in resisting a law in which in the civil suit they had said he was bound to submit to. And if this doesn't really make any sense right now, hopefully it will in a few minutes. And now is the time to make everyone uncomfortable. The question of whether or not juries have the same rights in civil suits as they do criminal ones boils down to the first principles purpose of trial by jury. There is substantially the same reason why a jury ought to judge of the justice of laws and hold all unjust laws invalid in civil suits as in criminal ones. That reason is the necessity of guarding against the tyranny of the government. And as I've been pointing out already, Spooner points out, nearly all the same oppressions can be practiced in civil suits as in criminal ones. For example, individuals may be deprived of their liberty and robbed of their property by judgments rendered in civil suits as well as in criminal ones. And as I've already mentioned, if you dig into how the tax code is structured, you will immediately see just how true this is. Most of the damages done to you, if you refuse to pay, and they decide to come after you, is initially under the civil law umbrella. And it has been established as legal precedent and practice that your case will go before a judge, not a jury. You are judged, therefore, by the law, not your peers. And so going back to the historical argument with Magna Carta that no property would be taken away from you without the judgment of your peers, we have completely gone to the opposite end of that spectrum. And consider then the damage that would be done to your liberty. If the laws of the king were imperative upon a jury in civil suits, the king might enact laws giving one man's property to another or confiscating it to the king himself and authorizing civil suits to obtain possession of it. Thus, a man might be robbed of his property at the arbitrary pleasure of the king. In fact, all the property of the kingdom would be placed at the arbitrary disposal of the king through the judgments of juries in civil suits, if the laws of the king were imperative upon a jury in such suits. And to that I say, thank God we don't have a king that could do such a thing. Instead, we have elected representatives, which do the exact same thing. In the cold of a tyrannical winter, we can warm ourselves by the fire of mocking poor saps in Canada. No offense, rodent dung, because they do have a king. There's little consolation to me in that, because tyranny doesn't really care what form it takes or what you want to call it, as long as it gets what it wants. And now Spooner attempts, as I said, to make you uncomfortable. He attempts using me as his proxy to really ruffle your feathers. He writes, to make this point plain to the most common mind, that is, that juries have authority in civil suits. Suppose a law be enacted that the property of A shall be given to B. B brings a civil action to obtain possession of it. If the jury in this civil suit are bound to hold the law obligatory, they render a judgment in favor of B, that he be put in possession of the property, thereby declaring that A is bound to submit to a law depriving him of his property. But when the execution of that judgment comes to be attempted, that is, when the sheriff comes to take the property for the purpose of delivering it to B, A, acting as he has a natural right to do in defense of his property, resists and kills the sheriff. He is thereupon indicted for murder. On this trial, his plea is that in killing the sheriff, he was simply exercising his natural right of defending his property against an unjust law. The jury, not being bound in a criminal case by the authority of an unjust law, judge the act on its merits and acquit the defendant, thus declaring that he was not bound to submit to the same law which the jury in the civil suit had, by their judgment, declared that he was bound to submit to. Here is a contradiction between the two judgments. In the civil suit, the law is declared to be obligatory on A. In the criminal suit, the same law is declared to be of no obligation. This scenario might seem far-fetched, but no government could enforce its civil judgments unless it could support them by criminal ones in case of resistance. A jury must therefore be paramount to legislation in both civil and criminal cases, or in neither. If they are paramount in neither, they are no protection to liberty. If they are paramount in both, then all legislation goes only for what it may chance to be worth in the estimation of a jury. If you were sitting on a jury and the accused before you was charged in the killing of a police officer who had come to arrest that man or arrest you for refusing to pay your taxes, you ignored court orders to pay taxes, you ignored court summons because you did not recognize the tax to be lawful in the context of natural law. And you were sitting on the jury for this accused person. How would you judge them? What if the accused was a dairy farmer and they had shot and killed FDA agents who had come with a court order to euthanize that farmer's cows because a lab somewhere claimed that mad cow disease was spreading, and the agents repeatedly ignored warnings to stop what they were doing or be shot? Or it was a bunch of chickens and bird flu was the concern. Or Child Protective Services had come to their house to remove their children because the parents refused to vaccinate them. Or if you were sitting on a jury and the accused before you had shot and killed a home invader, just some random burglar, at 2 a.m. Spooner wants to make it clear, very clear, that under natural law, the government agent that proceeds to enforce an unjust law and the nocturnal home invader are fundamentally the same. And a free man has the same right of resistance in each situation. And a jury even with even one natural law-minded, liberty-minded person can be the difference between tyranny or liberty being enforced. Because that is the point of trial by jury, not just to protect against tyranny, but really to enforce liberty. Les Storm says ostriches. I seem to recall there being a case where like an ostrich farm or an emu farm or something that happened, and they euthanized all the ostriches, which is just utterly tragic. Now, obviously, I want to provide a caveat here. I'm not advocating for shooting police officers. Ideally, the situation, say with that farmer, plays out where the agents come to the farm, they are told to leave, and they do. They go back to the court notifies the farmer, the farmer then appears before a jury, and the jury acquits him and thus strikes down that unjust order to euthanize the livestock, and there's no violence. If you recall, Spooner connects, though, the Second Amendment with trial by jury as being equal branches of a two-pronged approach at resisting tyranny. And it's important that founding documents of all states and the U.S. government recognized both of those, even though both of those have effectively been redefined into oblivion. But even more ideally, the people who strap on a gun and a badge and whose job description is to purportedly protect and serve no longer participate in enforcing illegal laws. I've been saying this for a long, long time, that tyranny is only effective as the boots on the ground are willing to make it. And just doing my job is not an excuse. People might balk at something like this, saying that it is an affront to the concept of rule of law. But rule of law is not a refuge of the conscientious. If by rule of law it is meant enforcing whatever arbitrary law an illegitimate government decides to hand down to its people. So in conclusion for this section, Spooner asserts that juries have the same rights and same authority in civil cases as they do in criminal cases, because the resistance of an unlawful order in a civil case, in which a jury is less often utilized, in modern times especially, with reliance placed on statutory penalties and so on, could very well lead to a criminal case as the defendant is forced to be more assertive of their natural rights, effectively backed into a corner. Your money or your life, and they decide to fight back. And in those criminal cases, it's generally acknowledged that the jury has more sway, and that's even true of today. In such cases, we can see that trial by jury is not just a negative, that is, preventing tyranny, but a positive force, that of enforcing liberty. So that's what I've got, and thankfully, ended about 15 minutes early. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to put a link in the chat. And the way this is going to work, for those of you that might want to ask a question, I'm going to put a link to join the StreamYard stream. So you'll click on the link. You put your screen name or whatever you want in the name, and then you can choose to disable your camera if you don't want to be seen. But otherwise, I'll just add you to the stream, and we'll just see how this goes. If this ends up going well enough, then I'm going to find a more streamlined way to do this. But here is the link in the chat. So if anyone wants to ask a question, you're more than welcome to do so. And I'll just hang out here for a little bit, and we can lament the ostriches and talk natural law. Rodent Dung says we need more trial by jury if jury is not a biased one like in Minnesota. Yeah. In the trial by jury system, all it takes is one person to nullify, because the requirement had always been unanimity. And that's something that we'll have to work against today, because today they've worked up rules of the court to where if one person, basically if the jury can't all agree, it has to be unanimous either direction. And so they'll call that a hung jury. Ash is asking me to tell people about the GART jury. So I mentioned earlier, we have a Great American Restoration Tour coming up here in April 9th through the 12th. And Ash in America, CanCon, and I are putting together an immersive trial by jury experience. Oh, yeah. She says, ask people what crimes they want to adjudicate at GART. By the way, Polymath, I see you in the queue here, but it's saying device is not connected. So you need to give permission to like your mic or something. And it would be too bad if you can't get on, because then people won't be able to hear your silky smooth radio voice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the immersive trial by jury experience. It's going to be really interesting, and the goal for me in all of this is that people can understand and see how few laws we would have. We've got EC was here, hey, brother.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing all right.
That's
so
your guitar stashed behind you. That's nice to see.
Oh yes, that's part of it.
What's going on?
Well, I'm interested in this idea of how do we get to anything like what Spooner is talking about from where we currently are.
Yeah, that's
because I really feel like we're such a long way away from it. I don't know how we put the pieces together. I don't think we can do this at the state level at all. I think the states are already all too big, among other things, and too corrupt, and that at best we could hope to organize this at the county level. But even at the county level, in a culturally diverse society, how do we get juries of anything like peers?
That is a good question. There's a lot of nuance to that. Some of that is covered in Spooner's essay, The Science of Justice, where he talks about the concept of natural law itself is ubiquitous to mankind, because he doesn't use the phrase that law of God is written on everyone's hearts, but that is something that I've latched onto that mirrors concepts that he talks about. As far as getting to that point, we already have the infrastructure in place. We still have the optics of a trial by jury, and this is the longer road. But the way I see it sort of playing out is people getting onto a jury, understanding this, and playing it out in an actual jury. And so voting not guilty and acquitting people, and then just being vocal. And I mean, I tell anybody I can get, who will listen to me, talk like people at work. Oh yeah, I got jury. This happened last week. Guy at work. Oh, I got jury summons. I'm going to be off next week. And so I've been talking about it. I'm like, hey man, this is your opportunity.
I would suggest that, for instance, in Minnesota, where we've seen these anti-ICE riots, we're seeing a bifurcation of culture that I think most people understand that if you were on a jury and those clowns were your jurors, you'd be cooked for just about anything. And the point of that is that we really don't all have the same culture anymore. Spooner is writing about an Anglo-Saxon culture that was the norm, and overwhelmingly so among Americans in his time, and certainly in the founding generation. But unfortunately today we don't have that.
Well, and that I mentioned that essay, Science of Justice, he talks about, regardless of culture, the basics of natural law are understood. The science of mine and thine, he calls it. So everyone inherently understands the concept of theft, the concept of murder, and the idea being, if by nullifying laws that go beyond that, then you eventually get to the point where people are, there's less laws that you're being brought up on, because effectively the courts just can't actually convict anybody on something.
Yeah, again, I think it's several steps to get from where we are to anything that even remotely looks like that. And it's partly because, for instance, again, if you see the gangs of rioters that are out in various places, I don't want to be judged by a gang of morbidly obese Latinas who are married to illegal aliens, right? That's just not going to work. Those are not my peers. And yet many of them are nevertheless, unfortunately, citizens.
Yeah. Well, and so where I mentioned this, I think back during the No Treason series as well. I do see that the role that I see Trump playing of a top down, this kind of harkens back to John Harold's devolution sandwich concept, where the problem has become so big that we do need some type of a top down assistance. As far as, what's that?
I totally agree. I live in Arizona. Without top-down assistance, we are going to continue to be run by a trifecta of mafias.
Oh, for sure. So I see it's not an overnight fix by any stretch, but provided Trump is what we believe him to be, and that the plan or whatever it is to some effect to bring back concepts of liberty to this country, at least. That being one of the legs, the three legs of a stool. You have to have your top-down approach. You have to have your bottom-up approach. So people have to understand what liberty actually is again. They have to understand what their tools are that are available to them. And then going back to Spooner's quote that all political power, as it is called, rests in the matter of money, we need to have our way that when it comes to some type of a civil suit or something like that, we have protected our money in a way that they can't touch. And that's where I do see Bitcoin as being part of that, because Bitcoin is not just money. It's a completely parallel transactional rail system and codification system.
I'm definitely pro Bitcoin. So there's that. I'm not going to be that guy and take up all your time. I'm going to let somebody else have a chance.
Well, and this is I'll go and pop you off then. Good to see you, brother. And appreciate the question and conversation. This goes back to it's not going to be overnight. Like it's going to take a while. Think how far, even on liberty-minded people, how far removed we've come from the stuff that Spooner even talks about. And so it does take a prolonged period of time to re-educate people into, like, this is what your heritage actually is. Let's see. We got Dave here. Dave, what's up? Do we have Dave?
No, Mike.
I got your audio. What you got?
Oh, you got the audio.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Did you see what I wrote in the chat?
The chat has been moving. Where did?
I did it on the studio chat. It's supposed to be private chat.
Oh, okay. I'm scrolling back up.
Well, I can read it real quick.
Yeah, if you don't mind. There's a bunch of comments in there.
I'm going through exactly what you just got through describing in the courts for my state taxes. Long story short, I had a charge back from a credit card years back that counted as income.
Oh, my.
So 2 weeks ago, I received a paper taped to my front door commanding the county sheriff to deliver relief in 60 days.
Wow. Yeah, that's an example of the tyranny that we are subjected to. And that's a significant issue. But it's like death by a million little cuts and a few big ones like that.
So what I'm thinking of is going the sovereign route and getting rid of the maritime law thing in court. Signing, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I personally, I'm not going to give any advice to that regard.
I just wondered really what your opinion is. I'm not asking.
Yeah, my older brother went back in the day. This is early 2000s, and he went down that rabbit hole, and I followed along with him, and he was firmly convinced of it. And you hear those anecdotal stories of people that were successful and so on, and those may be true. The conclusion that we ended up coming to was that when you're sitting in a court, whether you're on this side or that side of the gate that's supposed to symbolize getting on board or off board of a ship,
right?
You're in their territory, and the idea that and so this is just my opinion, the idea that a secret band of robbers and murderers, as Spooner calls these people, is going to be hamstrung by buzzwords and code words is somewhat wishful thinking in my mind. There's that movie, Pirates of the Caribbean, where they go and the pirates capture the girl and she says parlay. And they're like, oh man, now we're bound by the pirate code. Like, pirates aren't bound by the pirate code. Like, they're going to do what they're going to do, especially if they want to make an example of you. So, I mean, to each their own. And if you do the research on that and you feel that that's a route that you can have some success with, I certainly wish you the best in that. I don't think that's where the answer comes from, personally. My older brother decided not to file taxes for a number of years, and then he woke up one day and his bank account was emptied, and the IRS came in and garnished, through his bank, and garnished his the back taxes. So he ended up filing, and then for the number of years that he had missed, and got some return back, but he that was his conclusion, was there's no buzzword that's going to stop these people. So that goes back to what EC was talking about with the mountain before us is massive, and it's gonna. I mean, that's part of my motivation, is to get this information out to, like, the goal in mind. That's why I work in projects. Like, I have an end goal in mind. I'm able to work my way through the nitty gritty of a project. So this is the same way, in my opinion, that if we at least understand the goal, it's a lot easier to work towards the goal if we understand it. And in the meantime, we have to endure or find other avenues. So if you can figure that out, best of luck to you.
Thank you for that. One more quick question
Sure.
before I let you go, and I thank you for this. I'm a first-time listener and just happened to get lucky.
Awesome.
So, district court. So, county district court. What if I find a judge that doesn't have a signed oath of office or a state certified bond?
Well, I can't give specific advice to that. I can give you the philosophical side of things, and that if you go back and listen to the first 10 episodes of this show, I went through Spooner's essay called No Treason, the Constitution of No Authority, where he sort of rips apart the foundation of the Constitution and it being a binding document. One of the things he talks about in there is that oaths are essentially meaningless. They're not actually a legal check against tyranny in any way. So from a philosophical side, I would have very little trust or faith in anyone giving me an oath. All it is just a notification of intent, but the system is structured in such a way that they violate their oaths all the time and nothing ever really comes of it. So
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
But anyway,
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. Take care. All right. Saw this. I saw that in the chat. $200 rant. Good grief. Thank you so much. She said, okay. Saw this. Are you a man or a woman? I don't know the answer to that. I think you're a woman. But anyway, as promised, here's your tip for my first paycheck from the new job. Thank you for educating us on Spooner. Sadly, your education doesn't extend to iPad tech support, so I couldn't call. Oh, no. Bummer. Okay, well, in polymath, your vice is still not connected, so I can't add you in. It won't even give me that option. I'm going to go ahead and call it there. We're right at an hour, and we've got, I believe Chris Paul is on the narrative. So I'm going to be, and actually saw this, that this will go towards that. I'm going to be getting some gear here that will streamline the call-in procedure. And I should hopefully have that set up. It'll probably be a couple of weeks by the time I get that all set up. Word of housekeeping, next week I will be recorded. We're going to be out of town, and so it will be a recorded episode. My family and I are going to go see a play. Now my kids are into theater. They want to go see all of the plays, so we're going to do that as a family. Early birthday present for my wife. Had to mortgage the house to get tickets. Women are expensive, and I've got a fully grown one and two growing ones in the house. So it's a friend of mine, when his daughter was married, normally the bride throws the bouquet, and so he gets up there and goes, all right, I want all the fathers of unmarried girls up here. And so like all the dads come up, and he goes, all right, he pulls out his wallet and he shows that it's empty. And he turns around and throws the wallet. And so the guy that caught it, that's to play with that tradition. So that's my future. But yeah, Chris Paul is the guest on the narrative tonight. So looking ahead, like next week, we'll be going through chapter 9, the criminal intent, since I think that dovetails nicely with what we covered tonight about civil trials, and just kind of rounds out that whole idea of what is crime. And that will hopefully help to flesh out how to apply natural law to real situations. So thank you everyone so much for being here tonight. Thank you, Saw This, for that awesome rant on Claire Cat. Says she is a she. So I appreciate that, and I will remember that. Rodent Dunn, good to see you again. Glad you made it in the chat and picked us over Viva. And I'll see you guys all. I won't be in the chat. No, I might be. I might be able to be in the chat. The play is earlier in the day, and so yeah. And hopefully I'll have my computer back sooner than later. But anyway, thank you all so much. I'll see you all later.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.